Okay. So once again, welcome to another OAGI educational event. My name is CEO of the Open Applications Group, and this webinar is an introduction to the Open Applications Group Integration Specification, otherwise known as OAGIS. The goals of this webinar include a high-level view of what OAGIS is, the very famous question, what is a business object document or a BOD, and how is OAGIS used today? So a little housekeeping reminder that OAGI is the name of the organization, the Applications Group Incorporated, and OAGIS is the Open Applications Group Integration Specification. The environment that the members of the OAG try to address with their integration specification looks at the enterprise as a large and interconnected entity where we have customers and customers' customers and so on, and suppliers and suppliers' suppliers and so on that we have to connect to. As well, we have several business units that have to communicate both within themselves as well as across to each other, as well as to do business when we have orders come in or orders go out, to connect up all of the systems and make everything work. And used to have a member of OAG who would say, you know, I used to believe that if everybody in my organization just standardized on a single ERP system, then we wouldn't have any integration problems. But then I found out that, you know, our customers and our suppliers actually all have different environments than we do. And as we add new business units, the best new business units, we have to be able to plug these in and out of the enterprise interoperability backbone. And so we really need to start looking at integration holistically, both outside the enterprise as well as across and down the enterprise. Now, this is really the domain that OAG has started with and has stayed with throughout their efforts on their integration specification. So the original scope is reflected as such. It addresses both what we call B2B as well as application to application, and we even address several application to integration systems, for example, manufacturing execution or time and data collection, ERP and accounting systems. So it's a very broad range, and I'll show you a little bit more perspective on the range of content in the integration application as we move forward. But what is in the Open Applications Group Integration Specification? It's essentially process definitions that we call scenarios and messages to execute those process definitions that we call business object documents. And this is all freely downloadable in a single download off of the OAG website at oagi.org. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about what each of these two major components are. Here are some examples. We have over 60 scenarios that we include with the current release of OAG. And these include some of the obvious processes that we all have to address up front: order to cash, procure to pay. That's vendor managed inventory, logistics. We have several scenarios around that, and you can just go down the list. And all of them are included in the documentation later in this webinar, how to find and access those scenarios in our documentation. The business object document itself is a term we use but it really is three things. It's an architecture that we use to carry the data over the wire, and I'll show you some more details about what that is. And it's also data definitions that are within that architecture, and roughly equivalent to things like an 850 and X12. Later on, I'll show you that we have a spreadsheet that's downloadable off of another portion of our website that has a cross-reference between Edifact and ANSI and OAG as well, and how you can access that. And then you have the instances themselves, which are actually the data contained in the message itself. definition of the data, then you have the instance of the data, which is how it actually is on the wire. And so the BOG really is all three of these things at once. And so when someone uses that term, it's best to ask to clarify, are you talking about the definition, or are you talking about the data itself, or what? So the BODs are best looked at as a common data model, and we use them to define a common business language for this sort of interoperability between customers and enterprises, and also across the enterprise, as we discussed earlier. Right today, we use XML to express this data language. In the past, we have used other languages to express this, and we don't rule out, as technology moves forward, as it is rapidly, as you all know, looking at other expression languages. But today, this is the expression language we use. It is the most current. So the BOD architecture, I mentioned earlier that it's actually an envelope. And with this envelope, you can see that here's the name of it, a process purchase order, which is similar to an 850 in X12 language. Zygmunt, I hear you on the line. I know that you're more used to Edifact, but that's also included in our spreadsheet as well. We have this application area and a data area. The data area is where the actual data is, and I'll show you a little bit more about this moving forward. The application area is sort of some housekeeping stuff required, like who's sending the message and who's it going to and what date and time is it going to. So all the pieces of the business object document look like this in a non-technical way. We just discussed the application. Then we have the data area, which I'll show you in much more detail. And it's comprised of what we call NAS, which are things like purchase orders, invoices, etc., and of verbs and action on that, so that we can clarify the data model into an actual business language, like process or acknowledge or get and show against that noun. And then within the noun, we actually build this up using reusable pieces of data that we call components. Then, of course, the individual data elements inside that are called fields. What it looks like graphically, and this is a picture generated from a graphical tool called XML Spot. Several XML tools, graphical XML tools that are available out there. Some of our members like Octagen, there's Stylus Studio. There's some through the what we call the Eclipse platform. So there are several that you can use. And if you have any questions on that, you can write to us or ask more questions at the end. So within the data area itself, I'm just going to call out what a noun and a verb are, and then show you a little bit more about them. These are all the OAGIS nouns. And what we can do with the messages is we can combine these nouns with any two verbs to create a short dialogue within the scenario itself. And we go all the way from internal stuff like actual ledger and bill of material to B2B like commercial invoice or invoice itself. And then we have over here. So this is, you'll get a copy of this presentation as a reference, so I don't mean to go through this all. Just want to show you the scope of the content within the specification itself. Then we combine these nouns with the necessary verbs as driven by our business processes that we're trying to execute and complete. And so these are bearings, and this is also a document that's available that we can send you, or you can actually find on our resources downloads portion of the OAG website. And so the process is responded to by an acknowledge, for example. A change would be responded to by the respond verb itself. And then one of the more used ones are a get and a show if you just want to get access to data. And then one that's used quite a bit if you just want to send someone a notification that it occurred, like here's notify remittance advice as an example of this. And so what we do is we actually put them all together into a procure to pay one of our procure-to-pay business process scenarios that look like this. So you can see the nouns and verbs at work, which complete the business process scenario itself. But having said that, we have a library of messages and we have a library of these business processes called scenarios in the standard. Over time, the OAG members have developed this work into more than just flat messages within a process. They've taken the data and they've used modern software engineering techniques to actually create a platform. So all of the messages and all of the data within this library follows what we call a naming design rules to ensure the quality and consistency of how we do the data modeling itself. We have processes in place to ensure that our data model is what we call canonical, which is consistent. We don't have 4 address definitions unless we mean to. For example, sometimes people want address line 1, 2, and 3, and sometimes they want them semantically called out. We'll do that, but we'll do it on purpose. You won't see 3 definitions of a person, for example. So our business process methodologies enables to keep that data model held together. Then we have what we call the component libraries, which are the small reusable pieces of data like a person or like an address that we actually can then assemble into these messages themselves. And then you've seen our architecture in the form of a business object document that enables us to put this together and send it out, all of course. And so we have overall this platform, and the next picture sort of shows that to you graphically, where we do we have UML models within that's the scenarios, as well as we have that in the documentation for the nouns themselves. Then we have this held together by schema, and here is the bot architecture, our meta model, which enables us to repeat patterns like document patterns or the bot themselves. All the different types of components that we include within this. We have the OAGIS components that we've built. We're sharing some with one of our sister HRXML. And then we have done some work with ISO 20022, which is the financial area, to try and unify some of the financial transactions such as payments and remittance advice. And then we're working very closely with UNCFACT on their core component technology. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we're supporting horizontal processes, and then we're also supporting vertical processes as well. For example, the chemical industry, the metals industry. We've just completed some work the end of last year to ensure that the metals industry requirements can be included within the OAGIS standard itself. Sorry, I'm trying to make this go forward. Here we go. So what are the UNCFACT core components themselves? It's an effort sponsored by the United Nations, and they have been building some very detailed specifications on how to do data modeling, and they also, that's called core component technical specification. Then they also have their own naming and design rules that they've developed that OAGIS naming and design rules is based upon. And by adopting these core technologies within our data modeling technologies, we're able to provide greater rigor in our model and also have greater interoperability between different standards, because many standards organizations are adopting the same thing. So we believe that this will increase interoperability not only within our supply chains because of increased quality of the OAGIS work, but also increase interoperability across supply chains by the nature of the fact that several other standards groups like HRXML and Accord for the insurance industry are adopting these. And we also then find that it's an excellent base for any of our convergence initiatives, because we can then base the effort on, let's start with the core component as our base in order to harmonize efforts across organizations. And so what this gives us when we have this component model within OAG is the capability to assemble a noun essentially from other components and other elements. And we do this assembly process from these reusable libraries, and this again gives us the capability to have this single data model and reuse it across multiple different nouns as necessary to ensure consistency. In addition to that, over time we've developed some extension capabilities because we've taken a look, and any standard that is used out there almost inevitably has some small amount of extensions that needs to take place in order to be implemented. And rather than fighting that effort, what we tried to do is develop an architecture that would provide rigor around our users when they do need to extend the effort. So to that end, we've developed really two different kinds of extensibility capabilities within OAG. One is the old-fashioned way of user area extensibility, and we developed this before XML schema came out, and it provides an open area in each OAGIS component. In this way that you can make your changes, say in your own namespace, which is your own set of libraries, and then plug those into the user areas where you need be. And like I said, we already provide these in every single component. It provides an easy way to add your necessary data elements or components within the existing standard, and it also isolates where they are. One issue that may come up with this, though, is because we actually changed the base standard, when new releases come out, it may cause you to reapply some of these changes. As a result of that, our users, members developed another kind of extensibility called an overlay extensibility, and it uses an XML schema advanced feature called a substitution group, and enables you to build your changes once again within your namespace or library, and then plug those in using substitution group capabilities so that it looks like this. We have the base OAGIS, then we have your overlay in the terms of a substitution group, and out comes your version of the business object document. Benefits to this include the fact that it doesn't touch the base OAGIS. These takes place entirely out, and it only takes place at runtime, and therefore when it comes time to upgrade, you haven't touched the base OAGIS, and it should make your upgrades and management of your new code much easier. So we give you different options depending on the situation you're in. Some of these make better sense to one than others. So overall, what we see are the benefits, and we have had many people tell us that this is a major benefit of OAG, is that it does provide for the necessary temporary changes. It provides a framework so we're done within that, and also for less rework moving forward and easier to manage. So if we do have to do this thing called extending these messages, then this provides the capability to do that with the least amount of pain. Just a quick stepping back now. I mentioned earlier that we do ship OAG data model in the terms of XML schema at this point in time, but we've not always used schema. In our initial release, we had invented our own metadata capability, having seen that the EDI structures were a little rigid for the needs of our users. And then we moved to the first form of XML called a data type definition. And then we went to sort of an interim form called XML data reduced, which is a pre-schema. And then we went to full schema in March of 2002. And then we brought out our first version of the UN-CFAT core component technology within the standard in April of 2005. And we're actually working on the next generation of that now. So we continue to move this standard forward in order to provide for your changing and growing interoperability needs. So OAGIS 9.5 as it is today includes 63 scenarios, 85 nouns, and 13 verbs, of which we've put together 531 BODs. Now, if you see a noun that does not have the verbs when you're going through the libraries, please let us know. because it's really more of an assembly process to combine those than anything else, and not that large an effort. So we'll be happy to work with you on that. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly. So we've put together really 3 ways to find the BOD you need, because the library being as robust as it is, we like to give some help for folks. So approach number 1 is look up the scenarios in the documentation and find the one that matches, and then you can see what's in there. So let me show you an example. When you open up the libraries themselves, you'll see under 9.5 something called index.html. If you double click on that, you'll open up our overall documentation. And the documentation will have across the top some, here's an architecture overview, and here are the scenarios. If you click on scenarios, you'll come down to this, and you'll have all the list of scenarios which you can then navigate, and it display what the scenario is. And here's the mid-market order-to-cash, procure-to-pay scenario, and you can see which messages are used in it and how. And then this could help you find the message that you need. A second way is to just go through the list of nouns, because there are fewer nouns, and then you can apply the verbs once you find the noun you want. So you can go back into the documentation, and here's where we clicked on before, index, and you open up nouns, and here's the list of nouns, and you can scroll down the noun, you can double click, see what's inside that, and then decide which verb you're trying to accomplish. The third way, and I'm sure there's others, but the third way is that we have a spreadsheet that we've been building up over probably a 10-year period, so there's always a necessary add for more, where we are cross-referencing EDI, EDI X12, Edifact, and RosettaNet messages to the business object documents themselves. And if you're currently using one of these other forms in some implementations, this may make it easier for you to find the business object document that would best suit your needs. And this is actually available not as part of the OAGIS standard itself, but if you go to oaga.org and go to resources and downloads along the top of our website, you will find this. So overall, well, the BOD benefits are that it gives a complete common look and feel and behavior for all of our messages. It enables us to implement the UNCFAC core common components technology and our own core component technology, and provides a higher level of reuse and a shorter learning curve as well. So I'll show you a little bit more about how we think people are using OAG, and most of what we know is from word of mouth or from emails, because our download, as you know, is sort of like an open source. Sure. So we do surveys, and we also have folks that we've accumulated over time. So this is a survey that we completed in July 1 of 2010, as you can see, that shows the respondents at that time who is using OAG how. And you can see we're 64.5% for B2B and 73% A to A. And even last year, we already had 11% using us in the cloud. Right before this webinar went out, I just announced the 2011 version of this is now online, and you can find that on the front of our website if you have not seen the announcement yet. But you should be seeing that in your inbox very soon. And so we encourage you to do that, as we find this very useful to decide how we want to move the standard moving forward. So in terms of overall breadth, one of the other things we track is when people register on our website, where are they from? And this is a quick list. We have over 4,000 registrations on the website over a 2-year period of time when we reset that counter. And so far they represent, as you can see, 90 countries around the world. And it's always interesting to us to see new countries when they come through. So in terms of folks we do know that are adopting OAG, we have several large names within the automotive industry, as you can see here. We have them within the aerospace and defense, and in fact, we have some within the government side of this, where the Defense Logistics Agency within the Air Force is using us, and then also the UK Ministry of Defense is using us for logistics project as well. And then, of course, Boeing and Lockheed, the two largest aerospace companies in the U.S., and Northrop Grumman, which is the third. In high tech, we have a very large showing. One of the interesting things that sort of makes me half smile is that I learned Microsoft was using OAG, probably I learned this 5 years ago, when they first brought out the Xbox, and they were using this for their Xbox supply chain. But IBM has deployed us across their enterprise, and you can go down the list and see we have quite a large following in Scandinavia, in Europe, all across Finland and Norway and Sweden as well, and as well as all over Europe, as you can see with the British telecoms, and here in the U.S. And we have a lot of retail adoption, primarily in the warehouse management and logistics space, not in the point of sale specialty applications themselves, but we have, as you can see, some of the largest. Coles Group in Australia is the largest retail chain in Austria. Canadian Tire is the largest retail chain in Canada, and then the big ones here, Home Depot, Lowe's, etc. I skipped over one. Then we have a lot of what I'll call general manufacturing that cross into all sorts of industries. U.S. Steel has been a user for quite a while now. Merck as a pharmaceutical, general contractors, soup companies. We have beer companies that use us as well. And several e-government implementations, as you can see. So one recent one that we've discovered is the Apache Open for Business project. Among other things, has implemented OAG as the content within that. And if you're interested in their Open for Business project, you can find them at offbiz@apache.org, as you see it at the end. And so sort of in a quick summary, we have users we know of in at least 40 countries in 40 different industries. And we have 2 more events that I'd like to make you aware of coming up in closing. We have an introduction to OAGIS architecture, which is the 3rd in this series, sponsored by the OAGI Chemical Industry Council, and that will come later in the fall, and it will be hosted by our OAGI Chief Architect, Michael Rowell. And then we have our fall plenary and working group meetings hosted on the West Coast by Oracle, November 16th and 17th, and you can find that information on our website as well. So with that, I'll open up the chat and see if anybody has any questions. Okay, so I don't see any questions in the overall chat, so I want to thank you, everyone, for and remind you that we do have more educational sessions planned, and I invite you to stay tuned for those announcements. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.